Hey, it's Andy Yanez, and welcome to another episode of Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. We're coming off another Houston Cougars men's basketball victory, this time on the road against the Cincinnati Bearcats. The Cougars were victorious 72-59 on Sunday afternoon. Jarvis Walker once again had a strong showing for the Cougars. He had 21 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 steals, and Marcus Sasser also was managed to put up some points on the stat sheet with 16 points. He had 6 rebounds, and he himself also had 5 steals. So those two were kind of the two lead horses when it came to the Cougars against the Bearcats. And joining me, as always, Dunlap and Kris Gardner of the Houston Round Ball Review. There's a lot of background noise. Hopefully this mic can cut it off. But how are you two doing on this Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon?
Doing great. Another win for the Cougs.
All is well. All is well. Cool. Keep rolling.
So, like I mentioned, let's get right into it in regards to forward Jarvis Walker, who, again, something Kelvin Sampson said post game, he was proud of him because this is kind of the first time for him that he's put together back-to-back solid performance for the Cougars, and something that we didn't know until Kelvin said it post game. He's been battling an illness before the game. They weren't necessarily sure if he was going to play. He battled through it. He put together a strong performance anyways, despite that. And after the game, Jarvis Walker, we're going to have a clip from him later on, and you can tell that he's not feeling well.
Yeah, Coach Sampson said Darius was battling. He had a temperature, to say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he looked really well though, despite the temperature. He looked really well. I think one thing that stood out to me watching the game was all four of Houston's top scorers all had a double-digit shot attempts, and that's good sighting because just also watching that game, the chemistry is showing right now. I feel like the chemistry is really headed in the right direction. The team is really gelling together, knowing each other's spots. If any player makes a couple shots consecutively, they make sure they touch it on the other end, whether that's drawn up by Coach Sampson or just recognition between the guards. But Houston does an outstanding job of identifying matchups in which they feel they can win and exploiting those matchups. They did that time and time again today, going at different players whenever they got the matchup that they wanted.
And Dan, I want you to pat yourself on the back, brother, because Marcus Sasser did what you want him to do. He closed. He was a closer down the stretch.
Yep. Offensively and defensively.
So, what are your thoughts on that? So, yeah, man, steals. He hit the key three. He got 3 steals down the stretch. He was, I think, Mark Adams said during the broadcast on ESPN, one of those guys that a sit down and shut up guy to
I like
the
that
fans.
analogy.
Because when
I
Marcus
really
hit the 3, hit the steal, you could just tell the crowd is like, "Oh, we're not gonna win today." Nope, no, you're not. So, but just come on, man. Brag on it, brother. You're right. Talk about it. He closed out the game for the Cougs today.
I mean, that's what you expect from your star player, your leader, your player of the year nominee, finally everything. That's what you expect from him, and he came up and delivered and led by example. Whether it's on the defensive end, getting those steals, then on the offensive end, just knocking down big shots, and like you said, just closing the game. And that goes back into the chemistry. What I was talking about, I think you see throughout those spurts where Jarris had it going. There's a spurt where Tremont had it going. Jaywan had a spurt where he was making consecutive shots. But when it comes down to it, like Mark Adams said, you need a guy that shut up the crowd and get a bucket or so, or on the defensive end, get a stop and get out of transition and do really whatever it takes to win. And Marcus really did that today. And to his credit, I think Chris, you asked him during the week, would he grade himself? I think he said maybe a C plus, a B minus, C, a B. And I think that's a fair assessment because of, like he said, his efficientness. I think he wants to be more efficient on the offensive end, and I think he can do that. I think everyone is picking it, knowing their spots. Coach Sampson also said after the game that Marcus may take some shots that Coach Sampson might question the shots, but not Marcus the player because he knows what he's capable of. He has full trust in his ability to maybe make those shots that he might question.
Yeah, that's a great point in regards to Sasser and one of the other players that really, when the Bearcats, when Houston had built up, it was an interesting game somewhat because the Bearcats did jump out to a 5-0 lead and Houston responded with a 10-0 run of their own. And then really, Jarvis Walker was pivotal after Landers Nolly. He had a really good first half against Houston. He had tied the game, and then Walker scored 8 of 12 to kind of create some separation between Houston and Cincinnati going into halftime. And then coming out the second half, the Cougars just jumped on them, and they put basically essentially kind of put the game out of reach. They had built up a 20-point lead, but the Bearcats were able to cut it to 10 and call a timeout. He put his starters back in, and first play off that timeout, Tremont Mark hits a big corner three. And again, that's just some of the things that, from a outside perspective, you got to be really encouraged from Houston because you're starting to see not just Marcus, like Dayon you alluded to, that it's big that it's Sasser, but top to bottom, you're starting to see guys more comfortable. And Tremont Mark, Jarvis Walker, there's two of the other guys that we've talked about in previous shows really all season long. If they can consistently be consistent and also be comfortable out there, it just adds a whole nother layer to this Houston offense. And it's going to make it really tough for opponents to beat them come March.
I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. The Bearcats, they were really living by the 3-point shot in the first half, especially. I mean, I think they took 17 threes in the first half, made 6. So they hung around. And there's knowledge. You said Andy was 4 for 4 from 3 in the first half. Did not attempt a 3 in the second half. Just 2 field goal attempts overall for him. So the Cougs made whatever adjustments. So they got after it and made sure he was not going to get a 3 in the second half. But just your thoughts. This is my personal opinion. Anything's possible in one game scenario, all that kind of stuff. But it's very, very hard to beat the Cougs if you were going to solely rely on 3-point shooting. Because at some point, they're going to make adjustments, clamp down, get better hands in your face, whatever, and take that away from you. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think one way to beat Houston is to knock down that three. I think you got to have a guard or have multiple guards that can do that and be able to do it off the dribble. Because when you get in that pick and roll scenario, Houston blitzes and it often doesn't allow you to either penetrate their defense and it also kind of forces you to give up the basketball. And so I'm not really mad at their philosophy of shooting those threes. But I think that's a way that Houston can be beat because you're not going to beat them inside. So I think but their defense, what, number 2 in the nation in 3-point efficiency, defensive efficiency.
Something like that,
So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's hard because they close down. They do such a good job paying attention to detail. And like you just mentioned, making that adjustment and limited knowledge to no points and no field goal attempts in the second half. And so I think it's something teams, if you have the ability to do that, I think that's one way to be effective versus Houston.
Real quickly, Chris, before we're going to get into some post game clips, but first and foremost, I would like to plug that this is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family, the primary sponsor for Let's Rage Coogs for the remainder of the regular season. Now that we are about 2 months left of the regular season, kind of dang, we're running out of time for the regular season, but not only will they be the primary sponsor for the remainder of the regular season, but into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament as well. And also want to give a shout out to our other partners here on Let's Rage Coogs, beginning with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective. They're the entity behind the Star Pizza commercials. The biggest one that people probably know about is that the Anthony Jones. But this upcoming week, there will be a new commercial featuring one of the Houston Cougars men's basketball players. I guess I'll kind of play a spoiler. It's going to be Ryan Elvin. It'll be featured in the Star Pizza commercial that is expected to come out this week. So be on the lookout for that. And who knows, it might pop up on our show later this week as well. But of course, they are sponsoring Star Pizza, which has multiple locations across the Houston area. If you're ever in the mood for some pizza, make sure that it is Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. And please be sure to visit them online at starpizza.net. And of course, we also like to give a shout out to one of our other sponsors, HOUNIL.com. which is a subscription-based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston student athletes benefit from the new name, image, and likeness rules. Athletes can create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need is for you to subscribe. Plans start at just $20 a month, and that money goes to athletes. Again, that's $20 a month, and subscribers will get one-of-a-kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on a national stage. Subscribe at hounil.com, and as always, go Cougs. So, well, I'll go right into the Jarvis Walker clip, and it's going to be really short, and it's going to be evident why it's really short just by looking at him talk. But here's what Jarvis Walker had to say post-game following Houston 72-59 victory over Cincinnati. First and foremost, Coach Sampson's talking about how you were a little high fever heading into the game. Feeling good, feeling bad. You don't look so good.
No, I'll be okay though.
All right, just in terms of the game, Coach was talking about how he was proud of you. This is the first time. You said you strung together back-to-back strong performances going back to Thursday. Where do you feel like at a point right now where your game is, just in terms of how you've grown from throughout the beginning of the season?
I just feel like I'm starting to get more consistent and more aggressive on offense.
How's Coach trust? Has that helped you then?
Yeah, definitely. Like in practice, he tells me to be aggressive, shoot when I'm open, just make plays for my teammates, so it definitely helps.
So that was Jarvis Walker. You could tell he was talking to George. You don't see in the video. He was talking to head athletic trainer John Houston right before he stepped into that interview, and you could kind of tell they were going over stuff that they were planning once they got into the plane and head back to Houston. But just right there, again, going back to Walker and kind of the growth he's shown throughout the season, and I think Kelvin's comments, which we're going to get to in a bit as well, when he talks about, one, he's proud that he's been able to string together strong back-to-back performances, but two, that they're not going to necessarily they're not going to focus too much on it. It's back-to-back performance. That's great. It's a milestone, but the bigger goal is still in the future.
What Coach said, and go further to your question you asked him, Andy, was he was glad to see Jarvis put two good games together. Now do three in a row, 4 in a row, 5 in a row. So Jarvis does that, becomes more consistent. As Mr. Smith says here, I don't know about the biggest mismatch in college basketball, but he's one of them. If he's more consistent, he can beat you inside, he can beat you outside. He's got great hands and reaction on defending the inbounder, on baseline, sideline, whatever. He's got quick hands. He had a steal near midcourt today. So he's getting better. I think he's getting more comfortable in the system, more aggressive with his decision making. So it's good to see. Now let's see what he does in Houston next game and just keep adding to it. Because if you have Marcus Sasser getting better, Jarvis Walker getting better, that's a pretty solid inside-outside tandem right there.
Also, Tremont getting better, J1 getting better. I think those the first 4 leading scorers are all not only getting better individually, but they're gelling well together. That's the main thing that I'm seeing. And I think for Jarvis, in my opinion, watching the game, he's realizing where he can attack, where he should attack, where he's going to get the ball, where he wants the ball, and really just kind of figuring out the college game and how to be effective day in and day out in the college game. And I mean, he's just a nightmare, a matchup nightmare because he can do it off the dribble as well. I think that's one thing that takes his game to another level because he can attack closeouts and do it off the dribble. He doesn't have to get all the way inside. He can shoot a floater. He can shoot a mid-range jumper. He can beat you on all 3 levels, like Kris said. But I think one thing he's doing is just the game is slowing down. It seems like I think that's probably the question we should ask him next. Does he feel like the game is slowing down for him now that he's however many months into the season? And but also Terrence, man, I think Coach Sampson does a great job developing depth. And he did a great job of doing that with his freshmen. Because you look over the last month or so, probably early on, well, last 2 months, the last 4 or 5 games, there was a stretch where Emmanuel was having a good games and he was impacting the team. And then if you look over his last couple games, it's been Terrence having a couple of good games and impacting off the bench. And I think that having that depth, developing both of those players, because you never know in any given game which you may need, is going to bode well for Houston. Terrence, once he got in his first 2 possessions, offensive rebound, put back. The next one, the box out, drew a defensive foul over the back, and so and he went 2 for 2 on the offensive end. And so I think as he's continued to develop along with Jarris and Emmanuel, the depth of this team, especially with their young players, I think it's going to gel together well overall with the overall team.
One of the things in regards to Arsenal, and this was Ryan from GoCoogs.com. I saw him tweet it out earlier during the game, but it's something that Kelvin told the reporters and went Friday after the practice. But in regards to the freshman, he doesn't put anyone that isn't prepared to play in a hostile environment. And Terrence Arsenal, Emmanuel Sharp, and of course Jarris Walker, who started, they all got minutes early. It wasn't once they had gotten that 20-point lead, but they got minutes early in the first half. And great point that Mr. Smith brings up. Arsenal, he says Arsenal played solid defense on Nolly, helped cool him off. Nolly was hot in the first half, which again, that's one of the underrated aspects just in terms of it's something that Kelvin said, I guess, over the course of the week now, where he's starting to see Arsenal progress in practice. Now, obviously, we can't see that, but you can kind of see it now where it seems like Arsenal's starting to get much more into a solid rotational spot for Houston in the last few games.
It's all part of the development. It's all part of the plan of development within the season, not just off-season development. So it's good to see Terrence play well the last couple of games. But again, he's a freshman. So let's see what he does the next game. And just continue stringing these games together. Because overall, Coach Sampson said in postgame, this team can still get better. Now, it's the question, and he doesn't know that he said it himself. He doesn't know how much better, but this team still has room to improve and get better. It's not too shabby when you're, 16-1 on January 8th.
Yep. I mean, and one thing that I think this team is getting better at, I mean, I keep saying it this episode, this game, I just can see them like knowing each other. It feels like their chemistry is just seems to be getting so good because I'm seeing everyone get the ball where they like the ball, and it's natural. It's in the flow of the offense. It seems effortless. It seems so fluid and being in transition. Also the defense. We talk about the defense all the time, but one thing that they really did today was getting turnovers and getting points off of those turnovers. It's one thing to turn the ball over, but once you get points off those turnovers, that's another thing that enables your offense because it allows you to get a transition and not have to execute. So this team just does so many things well. I think they're underrated on the offensive end. People talks about rebounding, defense, rightfully so, because that's a culture. But offensively, this team is underrated, and they're really getting better. Now, how much better can they get? It's yet to be seen.
26-4 points off turnovers for the Cougs. 26-4. And won by 13.
Damn, what I was about to say was, I don't know if you have like a crystal ball or something, but it always seems like you say what we're gonna you like do the perfect segue into the clips, which is gonna work right here because you're gonna see that chemistry on the clip that I have from JV or Francis in a bit. But first, I do want to remind everybody that they are watching and are listening to Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family as streamers. As we stream, I'm currently inside the Fifth Third Arena with the background noise there a little bit. After Houston's 72-59 victory over the Cincinnati Bearcats. Of course, this is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family, who is our primary sponsor into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament. And also, we would like to say thank you to our other sponsors, beginning with HOU NIL. As the Cougars move to the Big 12, Houston will be competing with national players in basketball like Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, and more. These schools have fans that have built huge name, image, and likeness groups to get their athletes' name, image, and likeness compensation. That gives them a huge advantage over U of H, where NIL is still a bit in its infancy, but you can help Cougar athletes by getting involved. Go to hounil.com, subscribe to player-created content like essays, video podcasts, and more, as well as getting access to private events with U of H players. Players are compensated for creating content, and fans get an inside look at their lives, and plans start at just $20 a month. And that money helps the Cougars retain players to stay atop in basketball and help build momentum in football, which, side note, in regards to football, they're starting to build some momentum with their recruiting class heading into the Big 12. But HOUNIL.com. Subscribers get one-of-a-kind content straight from Cougar athletes. Subscribe today, once again, for just $20 a month at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. So, Dan, you set it up perfectly. Here's what Houston big man Javier Francis had to say following Houston's 72-59 victory over Cincinnati. How everything that you guys do is a competition. Like there's a winner. There's a winner and loser in everything that you guys do. How do you feel that helps you personally be able, just from a standpoint, being able to grow?
It just makes everything more competitive. Just make you play harder. Because, right at the end of the day, it is only one winner and one loser, so you don't want to be on the side of losing. You obviously want to win everything, so you're going to go out and compete, play hard every time you're on it.
Do you feel like that intensity helps you guys out, like in the game, just in terms of it not being that big of a drop? Like how intense can those practices get?
Nah, practice be really, we go at it every day, no matter what. So, compete in practice, play hard in practice. We just like everything we do, no matter if it's shooting drills, we always try to compete with each other. And that's how we get better.
What have you seen from Jarris Walker and his improvement throughout the course of the season?
His confidence. His confidence got way better than when he first got here. I mean, he always had confidence, but you could see it skyrocket now. Nowadays, he's starting to figure out what he can or can't do.
Jamie, that is great.
he's starting to figure out like things that he can and can't do. So I think that's really helping him a lot too.
Just something like that, where they tell you like JV is great. What does that mean for you, just to know you have the support from your teammates, and how much do they help you, like motivate you?
They help me a lot. Like tonight, I know I didn't. But they ain't have a good game at all. But they always talk to me. They be like, "You gonna be straight. Like just next one, on to the next." And so that's what helps me stay focused. Like even days like this, nights like this, when not so good, they always go on to the next.
Javier is great. You heard it in that clip. He touched on a couple different things, but let's start right there from that team chemistry aspect down. Like you mentioned it's just a team that continues to grow and grow in many aspects, and that's one of them.
Definitely is. And I think confidence, not only as a team, but confidence individually, like he mentioned. And I think it all, of course, is used with Coach Sampson and the coaching staff, but also I think within the individual leaders. And like you just spoke to Jarris's confidence, you can see it. I think he's confident in his decision making and confidence in his ability to do. And like you said, not that he didn't lack confidence, it's just a different level of confidence. I know what I can do, but now I know what I need to do, and I'm capable of doing it because I've done it in back-to-back games. Now let's keep stacking up the days, like Coach Sampson said. But the chemistry is noticeable for me, who watch every single game. I think this team is on the rise. I think they should be the number one team.
I agree. And do we want to? How to touch on it? I asked Coach Sampson post game, very simple question about Ramon Walker, and Coach Sampson said that he was texting Ramon today. He said he thinks Ramon will be at practice tomorrow. So that's all we can go on. We don't know if Ramon is injured. We don't know what's going on with Ramon. I know, they had practice Friday evening before they left for Cincinnati on Saturday, and Ramon was not at practice. So at least let me be specific. He was not there when we were there. So I don't know if he was there before that or not, but the time we got to watch, he was not there. So he could be injured. He could still be sick. Ramon was battling an illness for a while earlier this season. So it could be he's dealing with that. Don't know. We could all speculate about other things, about some fans talking about could Ramon redshirt, all those other things. Could be that too. But that's a personal decision for Ramon. So all we're doing is based on what Coach Sampson told us in his post game and what we've seen or not seen in the time and practice that we're allowed to see.
Yeah, and that's going to be that's something that to keep an eye on, just in regards to what happens. Tomorrow's Monday. They don't play again until Wednesday, so I'm assuming the next availability will be on Tuesday. So that'll be certainly something to keep an eye on in regards to any updates with Ramon Walker. And hopefully, if it is an injury, hopefully it's something that he can heal up quicker, sooner rather than later. Certainly, if it's an illness, hopefully it's not something that's been long term bugging him. But Kris, on the topic, Dayon, if you're going to say something, go ahead.
Yeah. If I want to add one thing that Coach Sampson said after the post game about Jarris and competing. He talked about Reggie and how Reggie is tough and how he puts Jarris against Reggie in one-on-one matchups. And if he isn't going hard, Reggie is one of those tough players that's kind of going to bring it out of you. And Javier just kind of talked about how everyone wants to win. And I think Jarris is not only embracing that because he's playing more physical. And I think if he can keep going at the rate that he's going, not to say he's going to have 20 every night, but he can be at least 12 to 15 a night and be a huge impact, potentially even for some double teams. I think this team offensively could even take another step. I mean, we're talking about how much better could they get. I think he could be the catalyst. One of my brothers was asking me, could Jarris become that number one option? And I think if he keeps playing his way, I think he could.
I think we can say, especially the last two games, the level of mud in Jarris's blood has increased. Let's just say it like that. And if it continues to increase, and that just means he's getting more confident, more physical, and of Cougar style basketball is physical, gritty, grimy basketball. In the words of the board man, Justin Gorham, blue collar, not blue blood.
And just imagine if Coach Sampson had Jarris for more than 1 year, what he could develop into going into the next level. But future is bright for that young man, regardless.
Right.
And on that note, we'll segue into what Kelvin Sampson said about Jarris Walker. Here's what he had to say following Houston's victory over Cincinnati. Good afternoon, Coach. Just in terms of something you said earlier in the season, I believe it was in regards to younger players. You said sometimes it could be like a game of tic-tac-toe where you're trying to get younger players to streak a couple of X's in a row. Do you feel like you're in that point with Jarris Walker, or is it still too early to say just from a consistency standpoint? Obviously, we're showing the game, but for you, when you get to watch,
I never get carried away with anything they do, good or bad. We're gonna practice tomorrow. There's no coronation around here if you have a good game. Now, that's the first time he's had two consecutive good games, but the kid has put 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've had a lot of guys that's done what he's done, played 2 really good games, but that's the first time Jarris has done it, and I'm proud of it. He had a temperature before the game. I asked him, could he play? He said he's going to try. I said, well, if you're at 80%, then I want 100% of your 80%. If you're at 75, then I want 100% of your 75. His rebounding was down today. I didn't think his energy level was great on defense like it was maybe Thursday or whenever we played SMU. But he's getting more confidence in the offense, and our players are getting the confidence in him. So, but it's just, as always, it's just a good team win.
We'll go to Kris Gardner from the Houston Round Ball Review. Go ahead, Kris.
Coach, just what are your thoughts on how Marcus closed the game offensively and defensively with the steals?
But I like closing the game, with my best free throw shooters, ball in their hands. Cincinnati was still playing hard. They're still trapping, doing some things. But I thought if we got the ball reversed, we could hurt them down the middle. As long as we kept the ball off the sidelines, we're going to have a chance. You never know. But, Marcus's confidence is that's why Marcus may take a shot that I question sometime, but I never question him because I have such great trust in him, as I have so many of our guys that's played that position. whether it was Rob Gray or Damian Dotson, Armani Brooks, Quentin, Corey Davis. We've had a lot of guys that were really good at what he's doing. But Marcus knows I think when the coach has confidence in you and he doesn't overreact to a missed shot, and I was like that with Marcus when he was a freshman. So now that he's a senior, and Marcus is still getting there. I think this team is still growing. And I don't mean that to say, well, how much better can you get? I just think we can get better. I have no idea. Maybe a little bit better. Maybe a smidge. Maybe a nudge. Maybe a little bit more than a little bit. I have no idea. But the goal is to find out, how do you continue to get better? That's the focus. That's the little things. We go to watch film tomorrow. I'll call out certain guys for playing good or doing things the right way. But we'll find plenty of things that I thought would drop the ball on or let go of the rope on too. I mean, we're still evolving as a team. I know Terrence was his numbers don't look great, but his minutes were good tonight. And all these minutes for these guys now is going to pay dividends for us, I think, later in the season.
Dan, I'm going to toss it over to you. Reactions from what Kelvin Sampson had to say in that clip.
That last quote is what got to me the most. I think he said those minutes now for players like Terrence, Emmanuel, Jarris will pay dividends for them later in the season. And I think that goes to not only developing talent, but developing the depth and developing the confidence and the chemistry with this team. And the way that he's doing it, the way that they're stringing together these games, has been indicative to the season on how each game, a different player can be the leading scorer and beat you. So they're showing that they can beat you a plethora of ways. I think Coach Sampson is doing an outstanding job as he continues to lead Houston.
Dan, you have to hop off. Where can people find you? And any final takeaways from tonight's 72-59 victory for Houston?
You can find me on all social media platforms at Dayon Dunlap. I think it was a very impressive win for Houston. Once again, a freshman steps up big on the road. We saw Terrence do it at Oregon. We saw Jarris do it at Virginia. Today, he did it in back-to-back games in Cincinnati today. And I think this team is continuing to gel together. And I think they're going to be hitting their stride here the next couple months by the time the tournament rolls around. And loving what I'm seeing. And go Cougs, man.
Thank you, Dayon, as always, as he hops off. Kris, we've touched on Walker. We've touched on Marcus. We've touched on Javier on that clip. But one player that we haven't touched on in particular is Juwan Roberts, who, I don't know if you could call it quietly, but he finished with a double-double, had 14 points, 11 rebounds against Cincinnati, and he had a stretch there in the first half where he was the leading scorer before Jarris Walker started going. I think he had 8 points early on. And even then, when Cincinnati started applying some full-court pressure, there's a lot of times when Houston just ate them up, being able to break their full-court pressure, and Juwan Roberts was the beneficiary when it came to that aspect because he got to have a lot of late points.
And I like the fact that he got a lot of shot attempts. I think he led the team in shot attempts. That's I'm old school. I like big man to get a lot of shots. Big man, let them eat. If they have an advantage, let them eat first, and then little fellas do the rest. So he got 16 field goals. Marcus had 15, and then Jarris had 14. I'm good with that. I like the fact Jamal Shead took the least amount of shots of the starting five. Good. To me, that's what a point guard should do. Take the least amount of shots of his starting five. Let the other guys get going and rolling. Jamal had a few down moments, turnovers here and there. His photo wasn't falling tonight. He was 2 for 8 from the floor. But overall, it's good balance. I think except for Jamal, Deion touched on it, the other 4 starters got double-digit field goal attempts. So I like that balance from starting 5. Jamal Mark hit a key corner 3 when the Bearcats cut it to 10. So he had moments. I think each of the guys for the Cougs had times in the game where they stepped up to shut down Cincinnati a run. It's a balanced team, a team that could and should get better. And I just want to, I'm sure Justin Williams, who covers the Bearcats for The Athletic, he's doing post-game as well. But in his tweet, Bearcats battled, but this Houston team is just too good.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take that. I think that's a fair assessment. Cincinnati played pretty well. They just didn't play well enough, long enough to beat Houston.
No, that's a great point. Even there was a person I was sitting next to who he doesn't cover obviously the Houston Cougars often, and he just said something similar things along those lines. It's just when people look at this Houston Cougars team for the first time in person, they always mention it just seems like there's, I don't know if it's the right way to phrase it, where they're a level above, but just in terms of, like you mentioned, that intensity aspect. Because Cincinnati, they jumped out early. They had a good run. Landers Nolly, when they hit back-to-back threes and tied the game at 18, that was the loudest that Fifth Third Arena was. But Houston kept going. They stayed steady. Obviously, they still have their ups and down lapses like any other team, but that's just at a point where kind of the bar for the, so to speak, or the resting heart rate of the Houston Cougars, for an analogy, is much higher than than a lot of other teams. And so far in the American, by a lot in the American Athletic Conference, except Central Florida, that came in at Fertitta Center and then they gave them quite a scare. But up to that point, it just seems like that's been the case for Houston. They've just been a cut above 3 of the 4 opponents in the American Athletic Conference.
And I think that's really what they are. They are a cut above most, if not all, the teams in the American. They have stretches in a game where they'll go on a big run and almost in the game with that big run. Almost, because there's enough time on the clock. Teams make runs back. But they did it against SMU. SMU was completely rebuilding, starting over. But that huge run, big run today to start the second half.
15-2 run.
At 15-2 run, they turned a 7-point lead at halftime up to 20. So with 12 minutes to go in the ball game. So this team has the capability to score off their defense. Other previous Cougar teams could grind out victories with defense, and they didn't have a lot of or as much spurtability as this year's Cougars team has shown so far. So I think that's a little bit different than previous Coug teams. Now, this team still has a way to go for the rest of this season. This team is still inexperienced in a lot of areas compared to previous teams, but they're winning as they're gaining more experience, and that's great to see. And I want to say and acknowledge you, Mr. Yanez, to be there with the team in Fifth Third Arena. I love the locker rooms, the hallway stuff, where you could hear the guys, interaction where you're talking to Javier because you're on the road. So that kudos to your employer there, but also kudos to you for tying in the Let's Rage Coogs with that as well. So it's great to see. It's another thing that we're doing here on Let's Rage Coogs, part of the Houston Roundball Review on YouTube.
So they're beginning their have an event, so we need to start wrapping things up. Hopefully the background noise is not too much because of this mic, but we do want to give a shout out to our partners, beginning with HOUNIL.com, which is a subscription-based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston student athletes benefit from the new NIL rules. Athletes create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need is for you to subscribe, and plans start at just $20 a month, and that money goes to U of H athletes. Subscribers will get one-of-a-kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on a national stage. Subscribe at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs.
That was good. Good job. Because we can still hear, I know what's going on there. But it's okay. It's live streaming, and I'm surprised you're not. Hopefully, no one's going to start swearing at you to get out. But it's live streaming. But it's just another example of what you're doing with the team on the road, and that we hope to do this, provide this throughout the rest of this season. A couple of times, I'm going to join Andy on the road, and especially come tournament time, we're going to do a conference tournament, and as well as the NCAA tournament. We're going to go as far as this team goes. So stick with us, the Cougs, stick with Let's Rage Coogs. And at some point, fans who are tuning in on Twitter and YouTube, you'll be able to walk around wherever you are, probably wearing your Let's Rage Coogs shirt. So look for that too in the future.
Absolutely. And of course, we do also want to give a shout out to our other sponsors, beginning with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective, the entity behind those Star Pizza commercials, which, like I said at the top of the show, be sure to be on the lookout for a new Ryan Elvin commercial that is expected to debut later this week, on the week of January 8th that we're recording this, following Houston's victory over Cincinnati. Of course, those Hoop and Holler commercials are sponsoring or promoting Star Pizza, which is a sponsor for today's episode of Let's Reach Coogs, with multiple locations across the Houston area. Be sure to check out Star Pizza if you're in the mood for just a little. Chris, what's your type of pizza? Are you a
Pepperoni,
thin crust,
all
deep
meat,
dish?
deep dish. Deep dish is good. I don't like thin crust. Nope.
There you have it. And if you're ever in the mood for pizza, make sure that it's Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. And be sure to visit them online at starpizza.net. And of course, this is Let's Reach Coogs, presented by the Saxenian Family. So, Chris, one of the last things that we'll touch on, and as we wrap things up, so Purdue, current number one team in both the Associated Press and USA Today coaches poll, they fell this week to Rutgers. So Houston has positioned itself once again to, you'd imagine, reclaim the number one spot in both polls following that outcome. Do you think, one, that that's the case, and two, what does it mean? Because again, at this point, it's just a badge of honor.
That's what it is. It's a badge of honor. I think the Cougs will be number one in both polls, coaches poll and the AP poll tomorrow, Monday, as we're doing this show. I think the Cougs will still be number one in the net rankings. I'm wondering how long they'll be number one in the net because of the overall struggles of the other teams in the American. I wonder if the Cougs winning all these games in the American and other teams not doing well in the American at some point hurts the Cougs in the net. I think they're at a point now where the committee knows and they're respected enough that they are one of the best teams in the country. So being number one in AP coaches poll in January, that's nice. You know, the media can tout about it, the fans can brag about it. But you know, Andy, to me, it only matters one time we're number one, and that's the very last poll that comes out the day after the championship game.
Absolutely, that's a great point. So as we wrap things up here on Let's Reach Coogs, Chris, I'm going to toss it over to you for last day on before you hopped off. But what's kind of the final take from this game against the Bearcats? I think in particular, you know, like you said, that storyline is probably the most, I don't know if you can call it headline worthy, but if Jarrett Walker can consistently, like Calvin said, do it again, huge for the Cougars because, again, heading into the season, the five-star recruit, a lot of the hype there was from an outside perspective, and they can add, just from an inside perspective, from looking at this team, that they can add that consistent option because Walker hit the first three-pointer to open the game. He had stretches right there where he was able to push Houston's lead to create that separation. If he's on, and you know where you're going to count for Marcus Sasser, you know where you're going to get from Juwan Roberts, that puts this team in a real position to go into a deep run come March.
If Jarrett Walker continues to improve and plays better, more decisively, game in, game out, consistently well, the rest of this season is just another bullet in the gun, you know, for that analogy. Just another talent level in the bag for the team. With Marcus outside, his inside paired with Juwan Roberts in the front court, this team can beat you in a lot of ways offensively. and then Tremont Mark can get you in the mid-range game. So the balance is there. The team is winning, and from a making baskets point of view, Jamal Sheard's in a kind of a slump the last few games, and they're still winning. So they're finding ways to win. They got a game against South Florida this Wednesday at home. They're better than South Florida. Okay, but it's up to them to go out there and play like it. So continue to improve, continue to get these wins, and then come tournament time, we'll see where it all plays out.
Absolutely, and we're going to wrap things up here on Let's Rage Coogs. This is a first on Let's Rage Coogs. They're having, I don't know if it's a cheer. It says National Preview Day, so I'm guessing it's some cheer competition. So the booming noise just stopped because they finished their performance. But that's the first, and like you said, it's live. It's live. You got to roll with the punches,
Yep.
And that is something that it's something you hear on Let's Rage Cougs. But once again, the final score: Houston Cougars victorious in Cincinnati, Ohio. The final score 72-59 in favor of the Cougars. Jarris Walker finished with 21 points and 5 rebounds. He also had 3 steals. Marcus Sasser had 16 points, 6 rebounds, and he himself had 5 steals. And Tremont Mark was also in double figures with 10 points. He had 5 rebounds and 5 assists. And, of course, Juwan Roberts, who had the 14-point and 11-rebound double-double. Now, Kris, one final point, and hopefully I can get it in. What I was going to say, Marcus Sasser, something that he's done really good, and particularly this season, and this is something he's done all season long, is his ability to get steals or to anticipate steals coming from the weak side when players will try to pass to their big, and they're not even looking at him, and he steals it, and a lot of times he's able to take it all the way for a dunk.
Yeah, it's great anticipation by Marcus. I think he knows the opponent. That's scouting report as well. So he's anticipating. It's a great word that you use there. He hasn't been burned by it. His timing was off a little bit, I think, in the first half, and he picked up a foul on one of his attempts. But I think it's all part of his knowing the scout and knowing the tendencies of the opponent. So that's another example of good coaching.
Absolutely. So now we'll wrap it up because their performances are back and the booming noise is back. Once again, the final score 72-59. Kris, as always, thank you for joining me. Of course, Dayon as well, who's able to hop on the show. It's been Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. A big thank you to our other sponsors, HRUNIL, Star Pizza, and Hoop and Holler. Please be sure to check out their content online, HRUNIL. They're doing a lot of great things with athletes. And like I mentioned, Hoop and Holler, Star Pizza, they'll have a new commercial coming out later this week. From inside the Fifth Third Arena, a busy, booming Fifth Third Arena, this is Andy Yanez saying so long, and we'll see you back at the Fertitta Center, where hopefully they will not have a booming noise for post-game following Houston and South Florida. Until then, take care, and like Dayon says, as always, go Cougs.